There is a vine growing across the southern United States right now that produces more calories per acre than corn, requires zero inputs, survives hurricanes, and feeds itself by literally growing food in the air. A single vine can produce 150 potato-sized tubers in one season, hanging from branches like ornaments on a Christmas tree. In Asia and Africa, this plant has fed populations for 3,000 years. In traditional Chinese medicine, it's prescribed as healing food. In West Africa, it's a dietary staple. Then it arrived in Florida, and everything changed. The USDA declared it a Category 1 invasive species. States made it illegal to plant. The federal government spent $5 million on biological control programs trying to eradicate it. Counties pay contractors $50 per hour to remove it. Property owners spend thousands removing it from their fences. And every single one of those tubers being thrown away, every potato destroyed, composted, or burned, is food. Not famine food, not desperation food. Legitimate, nutritious, culturally significant food that could feed millions. This is the story of air potato, the plant too successful to tolerate, and the question nobody wants to answer. What if the solution is not destruction, but dinner? Welcome to Garden with You. Stay tuned as I expose the vine they're paying to kill, while people go hungry. The archive opens 3,000 years ago. In Southeast Asia, the river valleys were where agriculture began. Archaeological evidence indicates that the cultivation of Dioscorea bulbifera, commonly known as air potato, dates back over 3,000 years across China, India, and Southeast Asia. This wasn't an accidental gathering. This was deliberate agriculture. Farmers selected varieties, planted them near trees and structures, and managed them like crops because air potato solved a problem that ground crops couldn't: vertical space. In tropical regions with limited arable land, the air potato climbs. It utilizes trees, bamboo, and structures. Anything vertical can be converted into farmland. One vine can cover 100 square meters of vertical space, producing 30 to 150 aerial tubers without touching the ground. That's food production where nothing else can grow. The Chinese called it huangdu, yellow independence, because the tubers hang golden and free, independent of soil quality. Traditional Chinese medicine prescribed it for thousands of years to treat thyroid conditions, inflammation, and digestive issues. In India, it is called ratalu. It's cultivated across Kerala, Tamil Nadu, and West Bengal. Not as wild food, but as an agricultural crop, sold in markets and cooked in traditional dishes. West Africa, in Nigeria, Ghana, and Cameroon, Dioscorea bulbifera is known as nokwa or kapok, depending on the region. It's a traditional food crop, essential in times when ground yams fail. The aerial tubers develop faster than ground yams, providing early-season food security. Papua New Guinea, Pacific Islands, Madagascar. Everywhere air potato grows naturally, indigenous people cultivated it, selected the sweetest varieties, bred out bitterness, developed preparation methods. This was agricultural science happening across continents for 3,000 years. Then Europeans encountered it, and colonial botanists did what they always did. They collected it, shipped it, and planted it everywhere the empire reached. Botanical gardens, ornamental collections, exotic specimens. That's how air potato arrived in Florida around 1905, as an ornamental curiosity, a decorative vine. Nobody thought about what happens when you take a plant bred for 3,000 years to survive and produce food, and drop it in ideal growing conditions with zero natural controls. The invasion. Success as a crime. Air potato didn't just survive in Florida. It thrived. Florida's climate, warm, humid, year-round growing season, is perfect. The vine explodes. One plant can grow 8 inches per day during peak season. That's 60 feet in a single growing season. And every few inches along that vine, it produces a tuber. Those tubers drop in winter. Each one becomes a new plant. One vine becomes 50. 50 becomes thousands. Within a decade of its introduction, the air potato was colonizing fence lines, power lines, and tree canopies across central and southern Florida. By the 1980s, it covered thousands of acres. By 2000, it had spread to every county south of Orlando. By 2010, scientists estimated that more than 20,000 acres were infested. And here's where it became a problem. Air potato smothers native vegetation. It grows so rapidly and densely that it blocks out sunlight. Trees covered in air potato lose leaves, weaken, and sometimes die. Native plants can't compete. Ecosystems dominated by air potato lose biodiversity. So the invasive species machinery was activated. 1999, USDA declares Dioscorea bulbifera a Category 1 invasive species, highest threat level. 2012, Florida bans cultivation and sale. Possession of living plants becomes illegal. 2012, USDA releases biological control. Air potato leaf beetles, Lilioteris chenyi, imported from China to eat the vines. Ongoing, counties offer removal programs. Contractors were paid $50 $100 per hour to strip vines manually. Property owners spend $500 to $3,000 for professional removal from a single property. The federal government has spent over $5 million on air potato control programs. Florida counties spend millions of dollars annually on removal efforts. All of this, every dollar, every work hour, every beetle released, focused on one goal: kill the plant, destroy the tubers, eradicate the species. Nobody asks, what if we ate it instead? The food we're destroying. I'll let you know what's in those tubers being thrown away. Calories, 110, 130 per 100 gram. Like sweet potato, higher than a regular potato. This is dense, storable energy. Carbohydrates, 24 to 28 Dr per 100 gram. Complex carbs, slow-release energy. The kind that sustained agricultural societies for millennia. Protein, 2 to 3 Dr per 100 gram. Not high, but comparable to potatoes. Combined with other foods, it's substantial. Fiber, 2 to 4 Dr per 100 gram. Good digestive health and blood sugar regulation. Vitamins, rich in B vitamins, B1, B2, B6, vitamin C. Minerals, significant potassium, magnesium, phosphorus, and iron. However, what makes the air potato remarkable is diosgenin. Diosgenin is a steroidal sapogenin, a plant compound that the pharmaceutical industry uses as a precursor for producing corticosteroids, contraceptives, and hormone therapies. The global diosgenin market is worth over $700 million annually. Are wild yam supplements sold for hormonal balance? They're extracting diosgenin. Pharmaceutical companies synthesizing steroid medications? Many start with diosgenin from Dioscorea species. Air potato contains it naturally. Traditional medicine systems knew this empirically. They prescribed it for hormonal issues, inflammation, thyroid conditions. Modern science confirmed the compound. Production capacity. A single established air potato vine can produce 30 to 150 aerial tubers per season, each weighing 50 grams to 500 grams. That's 1.5 to 75 kilograms of food per vine per year. 1 acre of air potato vines, utilizing vertical space on existing trees or trellises, can produce between 5,000 and 15,000 pounds of tubers annually. That's comparable to intensive potato farming, but it requires zero tillage, zero irrigation, and zero fertilizer. The United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO, lists yams, Dioscorea species, as critical for food security in tropical regions. Air potato is one of the most productive species. While Florida pays to destroy it, other countries pay to cultivate it. The safety paradox. But here's the complication that changes everything. Not all air potato is safe to eat. Dioscorea bulbifera has multiple varieties and subspecies. Some are edible with minimal processing. Others contain dioscorine, a toxic alkaloid that causes nausea, vomiting, and in extreme cases, more serious effects. The edible varieties cultivated in Asia and Africa have been selectively bred for 3,000 years to reduce or eliminate toxins. The wild varieties spreading through Florida? Nobody knows for sure which varieties they are. Genetic testing suggests Florida's population may include more toxic varieties. This is a critical safety issue that prevents simple harvesting. You cannot reliably distinguish between safe and toxic air potato varieties solely by appearance. Traditional preparation methods address this. Method 1. Water leaching. Asia, Africa traditional. Slice tubers thinly. Soak in multiple changes of water for 24-48 hours. Boil in fresh water for 30+ minutes. This removes water-soluble alkaloids. Method 2. Double boiling. Boil tubers for 15 minutes. Discard water. Boil again in fresh water for 20-30 minutes. Reduces alkaloid content significantly. Method 3. Fermentation. Some African traditions. Fermentation processes can break down certain compounds, requires specific knowledge and time. But here's the problem for Florida foragers. Even these traditional methods may not be sufficient if you have a highly toxic variety. And without genetic testing, you can't know which variety you have. This creates a paradox. The plant produces massive amounts of potential food. Traditional cultures have eaten it safely for millennia. But wild Florida populations carry unknown risk. No simple field test exists to determine safety. So, what's the answer? The cultivated solution. Here's what responsible food security advocates propose. Don't harvest wild Florida air potato. The risk is too high without genetic verification. Instead, could you cultivate known edible varieties? Several Asian agricultural companies and seed banks maintain verified edible varieties of Dioscorea bulbifera, varieties with a 3,000-year safe consumption history and low or negligible dioscorine content. These varieties are genetically distinct from wild toxic types, bred for palatability, documented safe when properly prepared, agriculturally productive. If air potato is going to become food in the United States, it needs to happen through 1. Importation of verified edible varieties, currently complicated by invasive species regulations. 2. Genetic testing of Florida wild populations to identify any existing safe varieties. 3. Controlled cultivation using known edible varieties in managed settings. 4. Education on proper preparation methods for verified safe varieties. Some researchers and food security advocates are proposing exactly this. Transform the air potato problem from an ecological crisis to a food opportunity by introducing and cultivating verified edible varieties while continuing to control wild, toxic populations. But there's resistance. Why is food harder than eradication? Making air potato food instead of the enemy requires systemic changes that threaten existing structures. Regulatory barriers. Florida law prohibits the cultivation of air potato. No exceptions for verified edible varieties. Changing this requires legislative action. Ecological concerns. Any cultivation risks further spread. Even edible varieties can become invasive. Control measures would still be needed. Liability issues. No government agency wants to take responsibility if someone gets sick from eating an air potato. It's easier to ban completely than to manage safely. Economic displacement. If air potato becomes food, potato farmers lose market share. Commercial yam imports decrease. Pharmaceutical companies lose Dioscorine extraction monopoly. Invasive species control contracts and cultural resistance. Americans have been taught that air potato is an enemy. Reframing food as a source of nutrition requires a massive educational effort. But the most fundamental barrier is this: air potato represents abundance that cannot be controlled. You cannot patent it. You cannot make it dependent on annual seed purchases. You cannot restrict its growth. Once established, it produces food whether you want it to or not. In a food system built on scarcity, control, and dependence, that's not a solution. That's a threat. The global disconnect. While Florida spends millions destroying air potato, other countries are actively working to increase production. China. Research institutions studying higher-yield air potato varieties, improved cultivation techniques, and expanded medicinal applications. India. Agricultural extension programs teaching small farmers about air potato cultivation as a climate-resilient crop. Nigeria. Food security programs promoting air potato as a supplement to ground yams, essential as climate change affects traditional yam production. Philippines. Integration of air potato into agroforestry systems, climbing vegetables that don't compete with ground crops. The disconnect is stark. In Asia, Africa, agricultural research to grow more. In the US, millions spent to eliminate completely same plant, same genetics, different paradigms. One sees food security, the other sees an ecological threat. Both are right. Both are incomplete. What responsible integration looks like. If we're serious about air potato as food, here's what it requires. Phase 1. Variety verification. Genetic testing of Florida wild populations. Identification of any existing safe varieties. If safe varieties exist, selective preservation. If not, controlled introduction of verified edible Asian varieties. Phase 2. Regulatory framework. Legal cultivation of verified edible varieties in controlled settings. Continued eradication of wild toxic varieties. Clear guidelines for growers. Traceability systems. Phase 3. Controlled cultivation. Greenhouse or fully contained systems. No ground planting in outdoor settings. Container, trellis systems that prevent escape. Regular monitoring. Phase 4. Processing infrastructure. Commercial kitchens trained in proper preparation. Quality testing for alkaloid content. Safety standards, like any agricultural product. Educational materials. Phase 5. Market development. Introduction through farmers' markets as a specialty crop. Restaurant partnerships with chefs familiar with yam varieties. Cultural community engagement. Asian, African immigrant populations who know air potato as food. Gradual mainstream acceptance. This is how you turn invasive into ingredient responsibly. However, we're not doing any of this at the moment. We're just destroying while the plant keeps winning. The vine that won't lose. Here's the reality. Air potato is not going away. The beetles released in 2012 slowed it down. Manual removal reduces local populations. But every tuber missed becomes next year's infestation. The plant is designed to survive. Drop a tuber and it sits dormant in soil for up to 3 years, waiting for the right conditions. Cut a vine, and it re-sprouts from the root. Clear an area thoroughly, and tubers from neighboring properties drop in. The biological control beetles, Lilioceris cheney, eat leaves and slow vine growth, but they don't eliminate the plant. They're a management tool, not an eradication tool. Florida officials acknowledge the air potato will never be fully eradicated. The goal has shifted from elimination to containment, keeping it at manageable levels while accepting it's now permanent. So, we have 3 choices. Choice 1. Continue the current approach. Spend millions annually fighting a plant that won't die, destroying food, and accepting perpetual warfare. Choice 2. Surrender completely. Let the air potato take over natural areas, accept ecosystem loss, and do nothing. Choice 3. Redirect some of that energy toward controlled food production using verified safe varieties, while still managing wild populations to protect ecosystems. Nobody's seriously discussing choice 3. What you cannot do. Safety first. Before going further, let me be extremely clear about what you should not do. Do not harvest and eat wild Florida air potato. Without genetic testing, you cannot know if it's a safe variety. Do not assume preparation methods make all varieties safe. Traditional methods work for conventional varieties. Unknown wild varieties may be too toxic. Do not plant air potato anywhere it's not already growing. That's illegal in Florida and ecologically irresponsible everywhere. Do not experiment with wild tubers to test if they're edible. Dioscorea toxicity is real. Do not feed to animals. Same toxicity concerns. If you're in Florida, your ethical responsibility with the air potato is report it to county extension offices, support removal from natural areas, advocate for research into safe variety cultivation as an alternative. If you want to eat an air potato, wait for verified edible varieties to become legally available. Support research and regulatory changes. Never harvest wild populations. Your safety is more important than experimenting with food. The questions. We're not asking. The air potato situation forces uncomfortable questions. Question 1. If a plant produces food but spreads uncontrollably, is destruction the only answer? Question 2. Could we invest the same millions we spend on eradication into researching safe cultivation methods? Question 3. Why can Asia, Africa, and the Pacific Islands manage air potato as a food crop, but the U.S. can only conceive of it as an enemy? Question 4. If climate change is reducing arable land and increasing food insecurity, can we afford to reject high-yielding crops just because they're too successful? Question 5. What if the problem isn't the plant, but our inability to imagine systems that integrate abundance instead of fighting it? These questions don't have easy answers. Air potato is genuinely invasive. It genuinely threatens ecosystems. The ecological concerns are real and serious, but so is food insecurity. Similarly, agriculture is highly vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. So is the fact that we're spending millions to destroy calories while people go hungry. The answer probably isn't, let air potato take over, or everyone should eat wild air potato. But it might be, dedicate some resources to responsibly cultivating verified safe varieties while continuing to manage wild populations. Right now, we're not even having that conversation. The bigger pattern. Air potato is one example of a larger pattern. Plants bred over 3,000 years to feed people can become ecological problems when introduced to new environments. Instead of asking, how do we manage this sustainably, we default to eradication. Meanwhile, kudzu covers the South. All parts edible, high protein, traditional Asian food. Autumn olive crowds out native shrubs. Berries are nutritional powerhouses. Japanese knotweed spreads everywhere. Young shoots are delicious, high in resveratrol. Garlic mustard invades forests. Peppery green, more vitamins than domestic mustard. All invasive, all ecological problems, all edible and nutritious. All is being destroyed while people argue about food insecurity. I'm not suggesting invasion is good. I'm not suggesting we allow ecological damage. I'm suggesting we've locked ourselves into binary thinking. Native good, invasive bad, kill on sight. We're also missing opportunities for integration that could address multiple problems simultaneously. What comes next? The air potato story is unfolding right now. Research is happening. Some universities are studying genetic differences between Asian food varieties and Florida wild populations. advocacy is growing. Food security organizations are calling for nuanced approaches to invasive species that produce food. Regulatory conversations are starting. A few states are discussing frameworks for controlled cultivation of verified edible invasive species. Cultural bridges are forming. Asian and African immigrant communities, who have never stopped viewing air potato as a food source, are sharing traditional knowledge. This might be the generation that figures out how to turn invasion into integration, or it might be another century of expensive futility while the vine keeps winning. What you can do responsibly. If you're in Florida or affected areas, 1. Report air potato to your county extension office. 2. Support removal from natural areas and endangered ecosystems. 3. Volunteer for invasive species removal programs, properly supervised. 4. Advocate for research funding into variety testing and controlled cultivation. 5. Connect with immigrant communities who have traditional knowledge, but again, don't eat wild varieties. If you're interested in food security. 1. Support research into edible invasive species management. 2. Advocate for regulatory frameworks that allow controlled cultivation of verified varieties. 3. Learn about verified edible varieties of Dioscorea, species available through legitimate agricultural sources. 4. Spread awareness about the complexity. It's not as simple as eat the invasives. Everyone. 1. Question binary thinking about ecological problems. 2. Support nuanced approaches to complex environmental issues. 3. Recognize that sometimes the answer is neither let it take over, nor destroy completely. The vine between worlds. The air potato sits at the intersection of food security, ecology, climate change, cultural knowledge, and regulatory systems, and reveals how little those systems communicate with each other. Ecologists see threat. Food security advocates see opportunity. Traditional cultures see breakfast. American law sees crime. The vine grows, producing food whether we want it to or not. For 3,000 years, humans have managed air potatoes as a food source. Then we forgot how, and it became an enemy. Maybe the solution isn't killing what we can't control. It could be remembering how to cultivate abundance responsibly. The vine isn't the problem. Our response might be. If this has made you question what we consider invasive and what we consider food, consider subscribing to Garden With You and hitting the bell. Every like and share challenges the binary thinking that keeps us from finding practical solutions. The next forbidden food will be revealed soon.